Hi, my name is Tennille, and if you're taking this course, you are taking emotional regulation, and it's kind of split up into a couple different sections because it is such a dense topic, and I recommend looking into further to any of the topics that you're interested in, or I will also be doing um, more classes that go into a little more depth on some of these other issues or give more strategies. So this time it's going to talk a little bit more about what self-regulation is, how we as caregivers can support kids that we work with and support ourselves for self-regulation, and just how to make in general the environment a more welcoming and relational environment. So positive, um, supportive, and caring. Um, and then in another video, I will also go into specific strategies and language and things like that that we can do as well. So for today, we're going to learn a couple different approaches to emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is a pretty large concept and system, and so we're just going to be covering one or two slices of that today, and I really suggest you look more into any of the topics. I will have more in the future, but it is really you can't have a discipline plan, you can't have a classroom kind of a behavior management plan without having a better knowledge of emotional regulation. So I would like to give you some strategies to increase your own emotional regulation and that of some kids. Talking a little bit about the parallel process, presence, co-regulation, which are three concepts that we'll learn about and talk about today. And then at the end, a little bit of self-reflection, and then you should do the quiz or the evaluation to get credit for stars. Here we go. And I'll be showing clips or PowerPoints throughout the process, but feel free to put it on pause or come back to it. You can watch this on mobile or on a computer. You don't have to do it specifically in either way. So there are a lot of approaches that deal with the concept of self-regulation or emotional regulation or mental health or child mental health. Part of it is the mental health field itself, trauma, co-regulation, and child and human development. There's also applied behavior analysis, which deals more with kids' behaviors and how to kind of be a good behavior detective. I have a really short film on that you can watch. And later on, I would like to do a more in-depth analysis of it, but it is, again, a really big hot topic. Our sensory or our nervous system and how it responds to our, the stimulation and the sensory input in our environment. Conscious or respectful parenting or caregiving, also positive psychology, and neurology or brain science. And so those are the ones that I draw a little bit more from when I'm talking about emotional regulation, but there are other systems or approaches, and also trauma-informed care, which is not specifically on there, but that has more to do with mental health. So one piece of good news is that you are already teaching and modeling self-regulation every day with the children that you work with. And that is a really big piece. So when you are able to talk about your feelings, when you're able to express and regulate yourself and be calm and comfort the children that you work with, you are modeling and you are supporting them in their self-regulation. We need to remember that for children and for humans in general, development and growth occurs in the context of relationships. So those around us and those we have a trusting, caring relationship with are where we're going to feel safe enough to grow, to take risks, to explore. And young children, they experience their whole world as relationships, and that is the foundation for all levels of their development. And as it said there, a child that feels loved is a child that can learn, and a child that can self-regulate and control their emotions. So a little bit more of what that looks like. An adult that feels safe and cared for. So if you are managing your stress well and you have a good support system, you're able to support others. You're able to provide present, responsive, caring interactions with the children that you work with. When you provide those caring interactions, that safe space, that safe container for those children's emotions and development and exploration, they can better regulate themselves. They'll have less behavior issues, and they will be able to pass that on to other kiddos and even animals or others that they relate to or interact with. And that's what we call the parallel process. And you may or may not have heard that before, but I really want to go into it because whether or not it has been something that you're already aware of, it's good to review. And just knowing that it really does have such a big impact on the interactions that we have with children and how we're able to support them better. So if you're an educator, if you have a family support person, if you have a counselor or a coach or someone that works with you, when that person is supportive to you, both of them have the opportunity to grow. And first, the parallel process comes from psychotherapy or comes from psychology or counseling, where the client and the therapist, they have similar issues, and they have, because they're human, and they can both grow and evolve together. And that is how we relate to each other, and that's how we're able to kind of progress and grow as humans and individuals. And the parallel process, when it comes to education or early learning, is hopefully you have someone else who's supporting you. And that could be a coach, that could be your supervisor, that could be, maybe you have an infant mental health person that's helping you through reflective practice, or you belong to some sort of teacher or parents support group. The more compassion and caring we can provide for ourselves, the more we'll be able to transfer that to the children we work with. And same thing with parents. If parents are caring for themselves well enough, they are going to be able to be better parents. And then that child can be compassionate and patient with themselves and for others. So it is really, really important. And that's why I start there when we talk about self-regulation, because the energy that we have really transfers to others, whether it's positive or negative energy. And there's a lot of studies that have shown that whatever your mood is, that also is kind of transmitted or contagious to others through the neurons in our brain. So it really does affect others, your mood and your regulation or your kind of sense of being in that day. And this is just another way to see it. The helper, so if you have a counselor or a support person, maybe that could be a friend or someone in your life that is helping care for you or helping be kind of a listening ear, yourself, and then the child is at the bottom. Or if we put you at the very top, below you is your own self. If you don't have a support person, you really need to do a much better job of caregiving for yourself and self-care, and then the child, and then others. So it kind of, our energy transfers, and it just keeps going on and on. So dysregulation, or when we say a child has really disorganized regulation, is when they're not able to control their emotions. It's normal to feel emotions, but when they are either way too intense for the child to handle, way too frequent, maybe they are really explosive from 1 second to the next, or things that would typically not set off a child are really big deals for them. And that just means that they're very, very sensitive and very vulnerable to being triggered or having situations create that intense emotion. And if we know about child development, part of that is very typical for, depending on what stage they are or how advanced they are with their emotional development. But we want to look at things outside. Does it lie outside what would be typical of a child that age? Are they able to calm within a certain amount of time? So self-regulation is our ability to manage those kind of uncomfortable or disruptive emotions and impulses and sensory input. We're not being bothered constantly by every single noise we hear, or the clothes that we're wearing are not, constantly weighing on our mind. We typically as adults are able to think a little bit more before we react. Helps us oftentimes stop unhealthful behavior, so we're not in the middle of a training yelling things out or being really disruptive or rude. And then also when we're under pressure, for the most part, we can stay calm up to a certain threshold. And everyone has a different level of calm or level of emotional regulation. And the more you're caring for yourself and kind of finding that time to provide self-care, you're going to see improvements in a lot of your productivity and the way you're able to care for others as well. And so again, to stress the importance of self-care, finding ways to relieve stress that work for you, having a helper or a counselor or a coach or someone that you can bounce things off to, that they will help you with self-reflection, or if you have the opportunity of doing some sort of reflective supervision or reflective practice. It's not just about venting, it's about having someone be a safe space and helping you reflect on those experiences and process through them, because sometimes venting is just not productive. We can vent about things and complain, but we do need the person to be a good container for our concerns and our worries, and sometimes that negative energy. So sometimes if there's too much going on in your mind, you're not going to be able to be as present. And of course, like as I said, your stress is going to affect the other kids. Finding ways to relax. I'm not sure if you have ever heard of quadratic breathing. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that you can look at that talk about kind of self-hypnosis or meditation or guided meditation or progressive muscle relaxation. So there are ways you can help calm your body and calm your mind so you can come back into the present moment and really give your best in that moment. And when you hear about hypnotism, it doesn't mean that it's what you see in the movies. Hypnotism is just another form sometimes of meditation. It's just providing those messages so that you can calm your body and guiding you through kind of meditation and breathing and being able to relax, or you might hear the word decompress, and just kind of process through whatever emotional stress or response you're having. And we know that the work of caring for others is very emotionally stressful. And so finding ways that you have to release that stress is very, very important. So something I would like to talk about as well is presence. And that is a really big part of emotional regulation, because how present we are with others is not our physical presence. It is emotionally how we're able to be present in the moment and support the children that we work with. So if we're distracted and we're thinking about other things, we're not going to be able to be as present. If we're stressed and we didn't get enough sleep, we're not going to be able to be as present. And there's two different categories typically when we think about behaviors of kiddos and adults when they don't have a good level of presence. Is they're unmet, when they have some sort of unmet need or emotional needs, they're either going to internalize or have very subtle behaviors, or maybe it just happens in their head. They might just avoid eye contact. They might withdraw a little bit. They might be more passive and not engaged. They might hold on to things, or they might become more, kind of have more louder behaviors. So hyperactivity or kind of fidgetiness. They might seem more angry or defiant. They might push more limits or have more kind of frantic and uncontrolled movements. And a lot of those behaviors are stress behaviors or unmet needs. And instead of seeing them as behavior problems, we need to see and recognize both sides as, if it's not within the normal of a child's behavior, that they're needing something in that moment, either a break, or they need us to comfort them, or they need to change. And if you're able to kind of realize when those moments happen, and gauge the level of presence, your own presence, and then also that of a child, and kind of keep that balance going, you're going to have a lot better days overall. And it really starts with you. If you are not good at maintaining that stress or being comforting to the children, and really caring for yourself, it's going to be very hard to move past that. And this is just another graphic about what that emotional release looks like. So when we have stress, we do need some way to relieve that stress, and babies and children need it as well. And that could be physical activity, it could be tantrums, it could be laughing, it could be through play. The more that it accumulates, the more that they have those unmet needs, the more intense and the more frequent and the longer those outbursts or emotional releases will be. So the more we can prevent that and kind of create a safe container and a positive and caring environment in the classroom, you're going to see a lot less of those behaviors. This is also just another way of looking at it. So more presence is where there's conditions of safety and warmth and connection are being met for the child. Less presence, and of course more of those emotional behaviors, are when they're in stressful situations, when they go a long time without their emotional needs being met, and then they have no way of releasing their emotions. And so they're going to be less present, less engaged, and just less productive throughout their day and less calm. So we really need to focus on meeting their needs. One, we need to make sure that our needs are met. And then as we're able to meet children's needs, not just for food and sleep, but for comfort and warmth and attentiveness, then you are going to see a lot of those challenging behaviors reduce. And really, we know that children need plenty, especially the younger that they are, warm connection, empathy, support, freedom from both punishments, and then also freedom of choice throughout their days. We can't have things completely controlled by the adults. They have to have enough freedom to make choices and options and have a little bit of what we would call autonomy. For babies, closeness really is the primary need, and that's why it's a struggle sometimes for teachers who work in infant classrooms when it's one teacher to 4 or 3 babies. So more often you can be down and close to them on the floor, the better. If that means that you have to feed them a bottle down there, or be comforting one and have the other with you close by, as much as you can work as your base for operations, the closer to where they typically spend their day, the better. And being very empathetic to their needs and being respectful in the way that you're caring for them, that matches what their temperament or what their personality calls for. And in another video, you'll be able to see a little bit more about temperament. And for older children, respect, attentiveness, connection, and play are also very important. So emotional release, babies and children release their stress and trauma either through crying, through laughing. The older they get, it could be through tantrums or through play. And they really need to have a loving and connected and trusting relationship with the adults around them. Again, to be kind of a safe container for their needs. Otherwise, they're just going to keep it kind of bottled up. They're doing their best to kind of restrain themselves until they just can't anymore. And that's when you have a child that might have seen okay for most of the time, and then all of a sudden it just all comes out at once. Crying remains a really important way for children to release their emotions. And so as much as it's stressful for us sometimes to have children cry, that also signifies that they have had maybe an accumulation and that we could have helped them a little bit sooner. And learning to meet their needs sooner, especially for older children, is important. And for babies as well. Crying is typically a very late sign that something is wrong or that needs were not being met. To be able to help them and be a safe container, one, you need to offer understanding. So a compassionate and caring presence and listening. You need to see and respond to flags or signs that something is wrong or they're having difficult moments before they get to the point of crying or having a tantrum. So trying to be responsive to them and attentive and recognizing what the signs are for stress in young children so that you're able to respond appropriately and either change the activity, move them, provide comfort or closeness. And then if it does get to the point of crying, that you are able to provide a safe container and a caring way for them to express themselves. And that is what we call co-regulation. In the field of mental health, infant mental health, co-regulation is really what we would consider the only way that humans learn to regulate themselves or control their emotions is through other human beings. From the moment a child is born, they're learning to control themselves and to control their emotions by their parent or their caregiver holding and comforting them so that they calm down. So when we're stressed, we use our own regulation skills to return kind of to a state of presence and our baseline, to be calm and to be ready to learn and to be open. And that's what a calm baby would be. When you hold someone else, whether an adult or a child, you hold their pain or you hold space for them, you're also showing that person that their pain can be regulated. And pain or sadness or anger, sometimes those difficult emotions are hard for us to deal with when there's someone else's, and learning to be able to be conscious of that and support them more in those moments. Even just being a very calm presence, even if you don't know what to say, even just being there is sometimes one really big step. Not dismissing, not rejecting their feelings, but being present and showing them that it is okay to release those emotions and that you're there and you're going to help them through it. And the more that you help them soothe and calm themselves, the more they're going to be able to do it on their own for the long run. So typically, we're not going to continue to cry unconsolably as adults every time something doesn't go right. We learn how to regulate ourselves. And the same thing that we're trying to teach children is not that it's not okay to cry, but there's other ways of releasing our emotions and releasing our stress than just crying. And we learn when they learn how to verbalize or talk or through play and other ways we can teach them. And just the basics of when you're working with a child or an infant or even an adult, I would say, you want to have a very warm tone of voice. You want to acknowledge the emotions they have and maybe even provide supportive silence when they have gotten to a space where they are calm enough. So in the middle of the outburst, You're not going to want to problem solve with them because they're not in that thinking way. They're not in the right frame of mind for being able to problem solve or think logically, and that might stress them out more. If you know enough about that child, you could invite them to go to the calm down spot with you. You could give them a hug. You could just empathize and say, I see you're having a really hard time. I'm here for you. And if you see that they are getting more upset by you being close, you can take a couple steps back or maybe lower down the volume of your voice, and maybe just be there with kind of a caring look on your face. A couple steps that you could use for co-regulation or empathizing is, first, you're just going to listen. You're going to observe the child and see, okay, this is what's happening for them. What is it that they need? What is it that they're experiencing? You also want to think about, how am I feeling about this? Because you do want to be conscious about if their behavior or those strong emotions are triggering anything or bringing up anything for you. And holding them could be physically holding them, could be giving them a hug, it could be responding with empathy. And then when they get calm enough and you feel like things, like the air is going out and they're able to respond, and they let you know that they're ready by the way that their body is, or the way they're breathing, or maybe they've stopped crying, you can ask them a little bit about, start to ask questions. Or one, you could encourage and say, wow, you're doing a really great job calming down. Those are really strong emotions and you are doing great controlling them right now and calming down. And I'm here, right here for you. You can ask some questions. How can I help you right now? What do you want to do now that you feel better? Or what else do you need? And again, if it's a young child and they can't talk, those might be things that you have to understand about what they're needing at that time. And it might be also very challenging because you have other children around you with the same needs. And so sometimes you might have to prioritize who needs your attention and energy more, and let another child know, I will be right with you. And so you're still using your voice and your calming presence, but you might not be able to, of course, hold all children at the same time, which is understandable. And the more that you kind of create that emotional safe space in your classroom, the less you'll have to juggle multiple children crying and breaking down at the same time. Some of that comes from our own setup of the environment or the activities or the transitions. And some of that is also things outside of our control, like staffing, or maybe there was a lot of transition or changes that day, or some of the rules or the guidelines in the place where we work. So I recognize that there are things out of your control. So we want to think about, what are your limitations and how can you overcome those? Something you can really do about building relationships is what we call like an emotional bank account. And you may have heard this before, and I just wanted to go over because it seems to be very helpful for a lot of parents and caregivers. So like any bank account, if you don't make deposits, if you don't put any money in there, if you don't make any emotional deposits, then you're not going to have any money to take out later. You'll get overdrawn, and we won't be able to support children also in those difficult moments. So some ways that you can make emotional deposits and create your classroom as a rich and caring and loving emotional space. So the space you can't see, not about the materials, not about how the room is set up, but the emotional space. The space and the environment that you cannot see, but you can feel. Playing with children is a really great way. Having nurturing touch or voice, listening to them and being responsive to their needs and attentive. Having a relaxed way of talking to them. Encouraging them for their efforts, giving lots of hugs. And the more that you can make those deposits for each child, the more you're going to see a lot of the difficult behaviors reduce, or you're going to see the intensity and the frequency of some of those very difficult moments go down just by changing a little bit about providing different attention to the children that you work with. And you can, if you struggle with, okay, how much have I given? You can ask a caregiver or a coworker, like, can you observe me? I want to see which children, or if you have a coach for early achievers, which children am I spending more time with? Which ones do you see me responsive more? And they can put a check mark next to the kiddos that you're putting more positive withdrawals or positive deposits with. And then you also can kind of know, okay, I need to be more conscious about this child. He's really quiet, but then he has really big, intense outbursts during this, you know, playtime or outdoor time. And so you can kind of also reflect about making connections about how many times you've checked in with a child or provided those deposits, and what kind of behaviors you're seeing or emotional release you're seeing from them throughout the day. This is a little video about how we treat children and how that really reflects how we behave towards them and other children, or how our general demeanor is, and how that reflects on their general behavior. Very, very sensitive and very intuitive to how adults behave in the environment, even if it's not with them. I'm going to put the video on pause for just a second. So what do you think the child is going to do, the little boy is going to do after watching the instructor put the beads into the box 2 times? So their typical response would probably be, he's going to repeat the same thing because that looked like a lot of fun. So a stranger, another adult that he doesn't know, is walking into the room.
Hello, good evening. Today I was going to do
maybe just a little bit of reflection to think about and process the video. What did you notice after the other adult walked into the room? So thinking about the other adult's demeanor and physical presence, and then after that, kind of her scolding the other adult, and then the reaction of the child, which was he shut down and did not want to do anything. So some children will react like that, just shut down and freeze, because again, that's their kind of automatic response. Other children, you might see some difficult behaviors in that moment. They might try to leave. They might try crawling under the table. They might have some behaviors that we would think about as disruptive or difficult or hyper. And again, it might be considering the response that they're having to that very, very quick, brief moment of what one adult told them to told another adult what to do. So they are like sponges, like many people say. They are so keen and so intuitive about what's going on around them, and that can create space for them to explore, or that creates space for them to shut down and hold on to their emotions and hold on to their creativity. And we want to create those spaces where they do feel safe to interact with others. That's the end of the very first part. There's more videos under this topic, and I wanted to space them out a little bit in case you wanted to take a break. And in the next videos, we'll continue talking about self-regulation, but just a little bit different approaches to take.